Do you feel like you're stuck or drifting? We learned it doesn't have to be that way. We learned we can all live a better story.
Working the night shift as a temp in a high-rise cubicle, I knew something had to change. I was providing for my wife and our 5 children, but wanted a life that was more than just surviving. Watching the sailboats on the Hudson River during my dinner breaks, I wondered what it would be like to leave the hustle of the city and spend a year on a sailboat somewhere beautiful as a family.
We had no sailing experience. I'd been scared of deep water for over 30 years, and I was already stretching every dollar to pay rent and buy groceries for 7. But we turned our excuses into reasons. Of course, we would miss our friends. We could go broke. We could get injured, or even die.
Worst of all, we could humiliate ourselves if we failed. But we had a finite window of time before our children left for college, and that window was closing fast.
So we cast off the life we knew to begin an uncertain journey of thousands of miles, ultimately arriving at a new place within ourselves. As an English teacher, first in public school and now homeschool,
And as an Emmy Award-winning writer,
we understand the power of story to shape our lives.
in our book 7 at Sea, people find the courage to live deliberately doing what matters most to them, regardless of their circumstances. That's what we talk about, and that's what we call living a better story.
What could go right? It's easy to think about what could go wrong. I'm sure you've all had things go wrong or different than expected. You've experienced disappointment. We've been there many times. I'm Emily Orton.
And I'm Erik Orton, and we're talking to you today from our living room here in New York City. You've had the quick 1-minute version of our family's year on a sailboat.
Which makes it look like all like rainbows and dolphins.
You can get the 300-plus page memoir version, which goes into honest detail about our finances, fears, and failures, getting aboard and living aboard with 5 kids. I'm guessing you can imagine no privacy, laundry by hand, making our own water and electricity, planning around the weather, and best of all, becoming part of a beautiful community of resourceful, friendly people who live on boats around the world.
What could go right is not just a cute turn of phrase for us. We staked our future and maybe our lives on that question when we gave up everything familiar to live on a sailboat, and it was worth it.
Yeah. Today we're going to share some of the hardest parts of the journey for us, and they're probably not what you think, and we'll share what we learned from those stories.
Then we'll share how using a story framework helped us and will hopefully help you live a better story by becoming the hero in your own life.
It was 6 years' journey from the first time we sailed as a family until we lived on a sailboat. Our first sailing class was a huge hurdle. I had to take on a second job to pay for it. Emily was a hard sell.
I didn't want to take that class because I'd already been scared of deep water for over 30 years. I wasn't about to get on the Hudson River. And I reminded you about my fear. You remember what you said?
Yeah, I said, stay in the water, stay in the boat, don't get in the water. That's why we're going to learn how to sail.
Right. That's exactly it. He tried to turn my excuse into a reason that my fear of water was the reason I should learn how to sail. So there were a couple of other reasons. Our 2 oldest daughters were super excited to take the sailing class. So Erik got the second job and the 4 of us took that 5-week sailing class.
It didn't get easier. We learned right away that we all get seasick. We made it through the class and I wanted to try it out with the whole family. So, add a 6-year-old toddler and an infant to the mix. Let's just say that the other sailors literally pointed at us and laughed that day. It was a relief to get off the water. I had not yet told my family that I hoped to live on a sailboat. And after that first family sail, I didn't know if I wanted to do it. So let's fast forward 2 years and the idea reemerged. We decided to give it another try. We started locally in small day sailor boats and we worked our way up to 50-foot boats. Financing was a hurdle at every point. Our oldest even asked us point blank, she said, "Do you have the guts to do this?" But we kept taking the next step and then the next step. One day, we left behind life as we knew it in New York City and moved aboard a fixer-upper sailboat in St. Martin. Of course, that's when things got really hard. We mentioned weather, which became hurricanes, making our own water, and we ran into a slew of other mechanical, electrical, and relationship problems over the next 2,500 nautical miles. But the hardest part, and this is important, the hardest part was walking into the sailing school. Why? Why do I say walking into the sailing school was the hardest part? Because action follows belief. Action follows belief. I didn't see myself as a sailor. I wasn't one of those people. I never sailed. Sailing was for people who grew up around boats, or maybe rich people, whatever that means. So I wasn't going to walk into a sailing school. The hardest part is believing something is possible. So often, we don't even get past this point. For example, Emily and I, we were talking to a mom who wanted to create an income from home. I suggested an online programming school, where another friend of ours was a recruiter. This mom had a background in computer design, so it didn't seem like it was a stretch for her. She was comfortable using a computer, and I sent her a link, and she said thanks. So a couple of weeks later, I followed up, and she admitted that she never clicked the link because she assumed her computer wouldn't have enough memory to do programming courses. Action follows belief. She was in a tight spot. She needed to figure out how to provide for 3 young kids from home, but she wouldn't even click the link. She completely excused herself from that opportunity. She never checked out the requirements, the scholarship opportunities, or the earning potential, which was high enough to easily offset the cost of a new laptop if needed. She couldn't spend 5 minutes exploring this viable option because she perceived a possible roadblock 3 steps ahead. We all do things like that. Actions follow belief. And we don't spend enough quality time testing our beliefs. A lot of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves simply are not true. I didn't grow up sailing. True. I wasn't rich by American standards. True. I could never become a sailor. False. The hardest part for me of our incredible life-changing year on a sailboat was seeing myself in a new way and walking into the sailing school.
The hardest part for me was my fear of deep water. I was 4 years old when the movie Jaws came out, and I 100% did not see that movie. I still haven't seen it. But I developed a massive, abiding fear of water more than 3 feet deep. Any water deep enough to hold even a small shark. And this wasn't an issue for most of my life. Then Erik, my husband, my best friend, the love of my life, he wanted to learn how to sail and live on a boat in the ocean. And he was usually right that if I stayed in the boat, I would not be in the water. I don't want to get too technical about it, but we did have an episode with our boat sinking. I don't want to spoil that for those of you who haven't read the book, but not always safe. At first, I went along with the classes and the small day sailors, and I was pretty comfortable taking the next step because I didn't really believe we would live on a sailboat. We didn't have the money. We didn't have the experience, and quite frankly, I didn't think we had the nerve. Then we signed up for a 1-week course in the British Virgin Islands. I was sitting alone on the deck of a 50-foot sailboat while Erik and the instructor and all the other students were snorkeling away, and my fear was more obvious than ever. And I just stared down into 30 feet down into this crystal clear water. And if you took a photograph of this moment, it would look idyllic and tranquil. But inside, my rational and my irrational minds were duking it out. I was being silly, impractical, immature, maybe unreasonable. But on the other hand, I was scared. And now I was also alone. And I decided to get in the water. Deciding is not the same as doing. I took my sweet time putting on fins and picking a snorkel mask and cleaning and re-cleaning, and then I gripped each rung on my way down the swim ladder, and I put my face in the water, and I could see the whole underside of the boat and the chain all the way down to the anchor, and my stomach dropped as I thought about just how many sharks could fit in that space. If you're a shark lover, please be patient with me. I know we hurt more of them than they hurt us. But do you know what a group of sharks is called? It's called a frenzy. Yeah, that doesn't inspire warm, fuzzy feelings. So I held on to the swim ladder a little longer than I care to admit, and then I took off swimming as fast as I possibly could, as if I could outswim a sea creature. I wanted to join my group. I didn't want to be the lone target out there in the middle of an open lagoon. So as I swam, I hummed this children's song to myself, not like a soothing lullaby, more like a high-pitched protective spell I muttered to myself on high speed. So I then noticed a large green sea turtle gliding past, and for a fraction of a moment, I was completely absorbed in the turtle. Then I wondered, what eats turtles? And I swam faster, and I was getting closer to the coral reef along the edge of this island, and I could see a dozen snorkel tubes just like bobbing, and I tucked my face back in the water and kicked even harder. If I made it to the reef before a shark came into the lagoon, I'd have a 1 in 12 chance of not being the snorkeler he picked. But as I approached the reef, I noticed this iridescent purple fish about this big, and it had a smiling blue face, and I followed her. Let's just say it's a her. And she led me to a small school of bright yellow fish the size of my hand, then bright blue fish swimming in and out of these sea fans, and tiny fish smaller than my pinky with bioluminescent stripes. I've seen Finding Nemo, I've watched some National Geographic specials, but those don't even compare to seeing the reef in person. The fish weren't worried. I started to wonder where they were going and why, and I forgot to be scared. I was stunned that this entire world lay just below the water's surface. It was surreal, at least for me, especially the first time. A moment before, I had been alone and scared on the deck of an unfamiliar boat. Now I was completely immersed in an entirely different environment, and I discovered that I loved it. Erik tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you okay? Do you want to swim back to the boat together?" And I couldn't stop smiling. I said, "No, snorkeling is my new favorite thing. You guys, I was scared of deep water for over 30 years, and in 5 minutes that changed." I had some old habits of thinking fearfully about the water, but compared to my personal experience, they didn't hold up anymore. And I had to ask myself, what other favorites are hiding behind my fears? I thought that wall of fear was 6 feet thick, made of concrete and steel, but when I actually got in the water, it melted away like a popsicle on a summer's day. The fear had only lasted so long because I had maintained it so diligently, and thank goodness it melted away, because some other favorites hiding behind my fears of deep water were scuba diving and surfing. 2 years ago, I certified to scuba dive up to 60 feet deep. And I'll never compete and probably never even get a cool photo of myself surfing, but I want to be surfing for the rest of my life. I love it. And I wouldn't know if I hadn't taken 5 minutes to poke back at my fears.
In our stories, we started out worried, unprepared, and uncertain whether we could actually accomplish the task before us. Getting in the water, learning to sail, living on a sailboat with our 5 kids. In the end, we did all of those things.
I got in the water, we learned how to sail, and our family did live on a sailboat for most of a year. And we transformed. In a nutshell, transformation is the hero's journey. If you've never heard of the hero's journey, it's ancient and archetypal. It's every story. It goes like this. The hero wants something, but there's a problem, and the hero needs help and a plan to solve the problem. The hero's attempts either end in success and transformation or failure, which on this journey is either a new problem to solve or the tragedy of giving up. I'm an English teacher, and Erik is an Emmy Award-winning writer, so we think a lot about story.
Story isn't just a form of entertainment. It can be a framework for life. When Emily and I find ourselves in a tough spot or at a crossroad, we ask, if I were starring in a movie of my life, what would I want me to do next? The answer is usually something that scares us because it requires growth. Growth means changing, and changing is uncomfortable.
That's true. There are 4 roles in every story, 4 main roles: the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. And we each play all of these roles at different times in our lives, but only the hero experiences transformation.
Let me give you a simple recap of each of these roles. The victim is never at fault and attracts a lot of resources because people want to help the victims. But the victim does not transform. The victim is a small role that makes the hero look good and the villain look bad. The villain usually has a sad backstory and wants others to suffer as they have suffered. Villains don't have friends, largely because they control and coerce others to get their way. Villains also don't transform. Heroes are willing to face a challenge even when they don't know how it's going to turn out. When heroes experience pain and challenge, they use it as a motivation to protect others from pain. In stories, heroes get all kinds of rewards, but the best reward is transformation. The guide has been a hero, so they have experiences and instruction and encouragement they can share to help the hero.
We all have moments where we are the victim or feel like a needy victim, a controlling villain, an uncertain hero, or a calm guide. We probably experience each of these throughout each day. If you're able to be a guide to someone facing a challenge, do it. You will make the world a better place. If people are counting on you to lead the way forward in uncertain, or even you're counting on yourself to move forward in uncertain times, we invite you to be the hero. This is your call. Most heroes are reluctant to step up. They don't see themselves as special or capable, and they don't really feel like they can do what's being asked of them. In fact, you may be the hero if you feel like the term hero does not apply to you.
Here are 3 easy to remember ways you can become a hero in your own life. 1. Allow yourself to see yourself in a new way. Before I learned how to sail, I saw myself as a victim of circumstance, somebody cut off from the experience of sailing. Then I allowed myself to see myself differently and took that step to go into the sailing school and simply get more information.
I never imagined myself as someone who would be comfortable in the water, and now I am. And because I'm different, I experience the world differently. I even had this beautiful opportunity to be in the water surrounded by manta rays and some small, gorgeous sharks.
Okay, step 2. Take one simple step. Very often the first step is getting information. I walked into the sailing school and asked about their classes. They gave me brochures and prices, but most of all, they gave me encouragement. Encouragement that it was totally possible for me to learn how to sail.
Then the step 3 is just to keep walking in that direction. Do something small. Send an email. Baby steps are a great way to build confidence. You don't have to make massive change. Sometimes massive change comes to you, like with this pandemic. Give yourself the grace of acknowledging that transitions take time.
Our sailing trip was not a singular event. It transformed us and transformed our lives. And we've discovered so many things can and will go right. So many things we enjoy now are things that used to scare us. I didn't think I could get fit, but I got fit. I thought I was too old to rock climb. I trained and climbed El Capitan in Yosemite at the age of 44.
I've talked about writing a book since the 3rd grade, and now we've actually done it. And I wanted to share some of the things we've learned on public stages, but I didn't know how to go from being a homeschool mom to a public speaker. And last year, we spoke all over the country to about 15,000 people.
We've been traveling as a family for the past 3 years, road tripping across the US, Canada, and Europe. We spent 5 months house sitting and farm sitting in Hawaii and New Zealand. We still have 3 kids at home. Well, now with the pandemic, we have 5.
The point is, our approach didn't only work one time. It's worked for us over and over again. And it doesn't just work for us. It works for people who are willing to see themselves differently, take the first step, take the next step. If you want some more ideas or tools on your journey, please check out our brand new website, theawesomefactory.nyc.
The world needs heroes. We want to help you live a better story. We want to help you find your awesome.
Thank you.